여러분 안녕하세요. Welcome to Cinemaria, the land of South Korean cinema. I was looking forward to watch today's show Mouse or Mausu. 제목이 똑같아요, but I did not expect the show to be this good. And to be this heavy. The show stars Lee Hee-jun, last time I saw him in The Man Standing Next. Lee Seung-gi, Kyung Soo-jin, Park Joo-yeon. I was so happy to see her. I really liked her in the show Extracurricular. The supporting cast consists of Cho Jae-yoon, who's in a lot of shows. Last time I saw him in Empress Ki. An Ne-sang, last time I saw him in The Guest. There are so many people. The story starts in 1995 when Cho Jae-yoon's character discovers the so-called psychopathic gene. With his methods, it's possible to predetermine whether a newborn baby is going to be a psychopath or not. This method would be used to erase killers from society. Meanwhile, a serial killer is roaming the country. When he gets captured, his wife is left with a difficult decision because the child she carries also has the psychopathic gene. What should she do? The synopsis that I just gave you doesn't represent the whole story. In fact, it's not even close. But Mouse is such a complex story that it's impossible to summarize in just a few sentences. But the show raises some very interesting questions, the main one being this. What if a psychopathic killer suddenly starts to feel emotions? Will he feel guilty? Will he try to repent? This aspect is introduced later in the show, and when it happened I was jumping up and down in excitement because this is such an interesting thing from a psychological point of view. I love psychological stuff, and Mouse is massively psychological. But it's not just that. The last thriller series I reviewed was Beyond Evil, and I freaking loved it. And I mentioned in my review how dark that show is. Well, Mouse is like 10 times darker. I seriously did not expect this. This show is not for the faint-hearted for sure. It's a really intense thriller, and somehow the show is able to keep this intensity up for 20 episodes. So if you decide to watch this show, well, fasten your seatbelt, because it's not gonna be an easy ride. As far as I remember, episode 3 and 4 had some humorous moments, and I thought the show was going to mix this lightheartedness with the heavy parts, but no. The humor very quickly disappears, and agony, sadness, helplessness, and despair takes its place. Which is something I love, but Mouse can be really grim. Don't say I didn't warn you. It's also a story that is full of surprises almost up until the very end. Around episode 5 I thought the show was going to sabotage itself because it set up a story, and I thought that the whole story is going to be about that. That is, catching a serial killer in the present day. But that storyline seems to end around episode 5, and I thought, what the hell is going to happen now? And this is where I have to give props for the writing. Even though that portion of the story seems to end pretty soon, it doesn't mean that it's irrelevant for the rest of the story. Quite the opposite. It's amazing how consistent this show is with its storytelling. Even though the story is highly complex, it never really derails from the main story, it just keeps peeling up the layers. It's a really hard thing to do. For example, there's a show called Black, which overall I really enjoyed, but that's also a long show and the story gets scattered all over the place. That is not the case here. The writing has a razor-sharp focus. Because of its complex nature, it does require your attention. But it's worth it. But of course, having a well-written script is not enough, and seriously, each and every actor deserves praise for their performances, but especially Lee Hee-jun and Lee Seung-gi. This is very much their show, and honestly, I don't even know which one of them is the main character here. They're both really important. Lee Hee-jun plays a detective in the present day who lost his mother and father to the serial killer in 1995, with his brother having permanently injured. He's a very smart man. He's a really good detective, but of course he carries this childhood trauma within himself everywhere he goes. So you can imagine how obsessed he gets when another serial killer starts to leave victims behind. He's really hellbent on catching the killer. His character is very well fleshed out, and Lee Hee-jun was absolutely amazing. I haven't seen much of his works, so I didn't know how amazing of an actor he is. Now I know. Mouse is worth watching just for his performance alone. Lee Seung-gi is a young police officer who doesn't really seem to be suited for the job. He's way too kind-hearted, and he throws up just by looking at a dead cat. But then something happens to his character, which I cannot get into, and after that he becomes one of the most interesting characters I have ever seen. Couple that with Lee Seung-gi's incredible performance, well, I have no words really. Not to mention the incredible chemistry that he and Lee Hee-jun has. Because they started investigating together. If you love seeing actors acting their asses off, Mouse is a great choice. And I'm saying this once again. Everybody was great, but there are so many characters in the show it would take forever to talk about everybody. In summary, if you like thrillers that are really dark, that are full of surprises, full of great performances, search no more. This show is for you. Even though it's f***ing long, the average episode length is about 70 minutes, so Mouse will keep you occupied for a while for sure. So why is this show called Mouse if it's about serial killers and the psychology behind serial killers? Well, there are more reasons than one. One is literal, the others you'll find out while watching the show. But it's a very fitting title. Now, I'm gonna do something I've never ever done before. I'm gonna pull a Chris Tuckman here, rate the show, and then talk a little bit about spoilers. Why? Because the show has 2 special episodes between episode 15 and 16, and I highly recommend watching them because they're really important. Even though most of it is repeated material, it is shown from a different angle, but it also has a huge problem. So big in fact that after episode 5 everything becomes a plot convenience. And it made me really mad. And I can't talk about it right now just in case you haven't seen the show. Just imagine that despite Mouse being as long as it is, I didn't really find any flaw in it. Seriously. Until I saw the 2 special episodes. I wanted to rate the show at about 95-96%, and I would if I hadn't seen the 2 specials. But as I mentioned, they're important. They're an integral part of the story. But that little flaw, that tiny flaw, kinda ruins the whole story. In a way. Don't get me wrong, I still love Mouse, I'm gonna give it 90% and I highly recommend it. But I have to address this issue, so if you don't wanna hear spoilers, stop the video right here. Okay, if you're still here, that means you've seen the show or you just don't give a fuck. So as it turns out, the killer is actually Lee Seung-gi's character called Chung Ba-rum. This is the only surprise I saw coming because the way he was introduced in the show was so obviously made for us to believe that he's a good guy. Which he eventually turns into, but that's not the point. The point is that in the special episodes it is shown how he had killed Lee Hee-jun's brother, you know, through the TV broadcast and everything. The problem is that he didn't even try to hide his identity from the priest, and during the broadcast the priest only had to say something like this. 사랑하는 내 동생. 범인은 정바름이다. I mean, he was gonna die anyway. What made him not tell this to Lee Hee-jun? And it made me really mad because he dies quite early on and the rest of the story can only happen because of this plot convenience. And it sticks out like a sore thumb, especially in a fantastic written show like this. They could have easily done this in another way. Have Lee Seung-gi knock the priest out, cover his face, change his voice, and problem solved. I just can't understand this decision. It seriously made me mad. It kinda ruined the whole show for me. I mean, it didn't because everything else was so great, but still I think it's a terrible decision on the writer's part. Do you agree? 여러분, 오늘은 여기까지만 해요. 영상 봐주셔서 감사합니다. 이 영상 좋아하면 구독해주세요. See you very soon. 다음 시간에 만나요, 여러분. 안녕히 계세요. Bye!